2016, researchers at the University of Tokyo found a protein that exists in only one known animal on Earth. They called it Dsup, short for damage suppressor. When they inserted that protein into human cells and blasted them with X-rays, the cells took half the DNA damage they normally would. The animal they pulled it from? A tardigrade. 1/2 millimeter long, 8 stubby legs, and a body that can survive boiling water, deep space, and pressures 6 times greater than the bottom of the Mariana Trench. But Dsup is just one of its tricks. This animal has a completely different molecular weapon for every way you could try to kill it. If you had been in any biology lab in the early 2000s and asked about tardigrades, you would have gotten a shrug. Maybe someone would have pulled up a microscope image. Cute little pudgy thing, 8 stumpy legs, a face like a vacuum cleaner nozzle. Scientists knew tardigrades were tough. You could freeze them, boil them, dry them out for years, and they would come back to life when you added water. But nobody understood how. The assumption was that tardigrade survival was some kind of biological accident, a weird fluke of evolution that nobody had bothered to investigate properly. Takuma Hashimoto's team at the University of Tokyo proved that assumption completely wrong. According to their study published in Nature Communications, Hashimoto's group sequenced the full genome of Rhamazottius variornatus, a freshwater tardigrade species known for being especially hard to kill. Sitting in the DNA was something no one had ever seen in any other animal, a gene coding for a protein they named Dsup. When they looked at what Dsup actually does inside a cell, the picture got wild. The protein wraps itself around DNA like a physical shield. It coats the chromosomes and blocks radiation from shredding the genetic code. And when the team took that gene and stuck it into human kidney cells in a dish, those modified human cells survived X-ray blasts far better than normal ones. Roughly half the DNA damage, gone, because of a single protein pulled from something smaller than a grain of sand. Think about what that means. That is not some vague toughness. That is a dedicated molecular tool built for one specific job. Radiation shreds DNA. Dsup blocks the shredding, one protein, one threat, and it works so well you can drop it into a completely different species and it still performs. But radiation is only one way to kill something. You can also just dry it out. And tardigrades have a totally separate answer for that. When a tardigrade loses water, it does something that should be fatal. It pulls its legs in, squeezes out nearly all the water in its body, and curls into a tiny barrel shape called a tune. Metabolism drops to nearly zero. No breathing, no eating, no detectable biological activity. It just sits there looking like a speck of dust, and it can stay that way for decades. Now, if you just yanked all the water out of your cells, everything inside would collapse. Proteins lose their shape, membranes cave in, and the cell dies. That is exactly what happens when you dehydrate human skin cells in a lab. Tardigrades dodge this with a family of proteins called CAHS, short for cytoplasmic abundant heat soluble proteins. According to a 2022 study published in Communications Biology, CAHS proteins do something remarkable as water disappears. They self-assemble into a gel-like network inside the cell, filling the space where water used to be. Think of it like replacing the water in a snow globe with clear resin. Everything stays suspended in position. Nothing collapses, nothing shreds, and the cell is frozen in time without any ice ever forming. And the moment water comes back, the gel dissolves, the proteins go back to their normal floppy state, and the tardigrade wakes up. Researchers have revived tardigrades from dried tune states after decades of storage in museum collections. This animal treats dehydration the way you treat a nap. Inconvenient, but temporary. So now you have 2 dedicated tools. Dsup for radiation, gels for drying. Each threat gets its own countermeasure. But it gets better, because the tune state also unlocks survival against threats that have nothing to do with dehydration. Tardigrades in the tune state can handle pressures over 6,000 atmospheres. For perspective, the bottom of the Mariana Trench sits at about 1,100 atmospheres. 6,000 is industrial diamond press territory. They can also survive temperatures close to absolute zero, and temperatures well past boiling. How does the same animal survive both ends of that spectrum? Because in the tune state, there is almost no liquid water left inside the body, and most of those extreme conditions destroy life by messing with water. Extreme pressure crushes cells because it compresses the water inside them. Extreme cold kills cells because water expands into ice crystals that puncture membranes from within. Boiling temperatures cause water molecules to vibrate so violently that proteins unravel. Take the water out of the equation, and those killing mechanisms lose their power. The tardigrade's dehydration toolkit accidentally doubles as armor against almost everything else. You solve one problem, you accidentally solve 5. If you're finding this interesting, hit subscribe. More deep dives on animal biology show up on the channel every week. That accidental armor got the ultimate field test in September 2007. The European Space Agency launched a Photon M3 satellite into low Earth orbit carrying a payload of living tardigrades. According to coverage by the Smithsonian, those animals were mounted on the outside of the satellite, fully exposed to bombardment of space, cosmic radiation, and unfiltered ultraviolet light for 10 days. No spacesuit, no shielding. Just raw exposure to an environment that would kill you in seconds. When the satellite came back and researchers added water, a significant portion of the tardigrades woke up and started moving around. Some of them laid viable eggs afterward. The group hit with full-spectrum UV radiation had lower survival rates, but even some of those pulled through. Living, multicellular animals had survived open space and come back functional. No other complex animal has ever done that in a controlled experiment. And the result makes perfect sense when you map each defense to each space threat. In the tuned state, gels hold cell structures in place despite the vacuum. Dsup shields DNA from cosmic radiation. The dehydration pathway already removed the liquid water that vacuum would otherwise boil right out of the body. Each defense handles a different piece of the space environment. None of them evolved for space. They evolved for puddles drying out on a warm afternoon. Space just happened to be the hardest possible test of the same chemistry. Tardigrades are not space creatures. They are not lab-engineered superorganisms. They are tiny freshwater animals that live in moss, lichen, bird baths, and roof gutters. There are probably a few hundred of them on your roof right now. They eat plant cells and smaller microorganisms by puncturing them with needle-like mouthparts called stylets. Their ancestors faced one boring, repeating problem: puddles dry up. So over hundreds of millions of years, they assembled an increasingly elaborate set of molecular countermeasures to handle drying out. Dsup for radiation damage that occurs during desiccation. CAHS gels for structural collapse when water vanishes. The tungstate for full metabolic shutdown. Each tool solves one piece of the dehydration puzzle. Stack them all together, and you accidentally create an organism that can survive environments it was never supposed to encounter. Scientists call that pre-adaptation. You build a tool for one job, and it accidentally handles 5. The tardigrade might be the most extreme example on the planet. That accidental indestructibility is why bioengineers are paying serious attention now. And honestly, you should be too. Dsup is not just a cool lab curiosity. The fact that it works when transplanted into human cells means it could potentially protect human tissue from radiation during cancer treatment, or during long-duration spaceflight beyond Earth's magnetic field, or in nuclear emergency scenarios where first responders face acute exposure. CAHS-style gelation could change how we store biological materials entirely, keeping vaccines or blood samples stable at room temperature for years without refrigeration. Imagine a field hospital in a remote area that does not need a cold chain for its medical supplies. The tardigrade did not invent these solutions for us. It invented them for itself hundreds of millions of years ago to survive a puddle evaporating on a Tuesday afternoon. We are just now figuring out how to borrow them. These things have been around for over 500 million years, deep into the Cambrian period. They have outlasted every mass extinction event in Earth's history, including the one that killed the dinosaurs. Not because they are big, or fast, or aggressive. Because at the molecular level, they found a separate answer for every single way the universe tries to break living tissue. And they did it all while being something you could fit on the tip of a pencil. 0.5 millimeter long, 8 stubby legs, a face like a vacuum cleaner nozzle, and a molecular defense system so layered that human scientists are still working through it protein by protein. If you want more stories about animals that break the rules of biology, they are already on the channel.